Alright, this is it.
This is it, Luigi.
Got the ticket, and it's the day that it releases here in the UK, because for some reason this film was allowed to premiere in America, but the UK had to wait. Is this some kind of marketing strategy to make the film's success last longer? Probably. Well, either way, I'm about to see a film about Lupita Nyong'o robot befriend Honky Honk. Saw Transformers 1 a few days ago. Last week, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty good film. In we go.
Microscope.
You wanna know something sad? I'm noticing that a lot of people are attending this particular cinema, and it's so much more full than the screening I went to see Disney's Wish. Like, when I saw Disney's Wish, I was in a cinema as big like this, but it was just me and some mother and her daughter, maybe like a few others, but that was it. So as of recording this, it is Friday the 18th of October, the release date of The Wild Robot, which for some reason had a bit of a delay here in the UK, and America had the head start in watching this film, but hey-ho, at least it's out now. What is it with all these delayed release dates? It happened with The Incredibles 2, and then with Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. What is with that? Is that just to expand on a certain film's success rate over time by playing the long game of delayed release dates? Whatever. I managed to watch it now. After much anticipation, especially from a brilliant first impression from the trailer, which didn't have much dialogue, but did feature beautiful visuals. More promotional footage would showcase that there was quite a lot more dialogue than first perceived, and there was a lot of mixed reception and a lot of fears and hopes given the recent reputation of Dreamworks. But does this film live up to its expectations? Oh, read the title, the video. Of course, I love it! I love it! This film is absolutely brilliant. Honestly, given their reputation with the bad guys and their other masterpiece, Bruce Campbell. So given their reputation with their films like The Bad Guys and their recent masterpiece, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, people were very much looking forward to The Wild Robot, which by the looks of its animation style was going from that kind of direction. It seems that DreamWorks seem to be going through some kind of renaissance era right now, given how they're experimenting around with CGI animation. They already know that they're very skilled and very good at creating CGI animation without having to rely on the big budget of Disney. So now they're at an age where they're becoming more experimental with what they can possibly do and how they can use the animation to further tell the story, not just a case of how well it looks, but also how can its visualization enhance the story? How can we tell the story through the ways the characters move? How can we set a tone through texture and so on and so forth? The Wild Robot gave a brilliant first impression with its gorgeous watercolor-like aesthetic with its natural setting, as well as using the abstract arts form of animation to further enhance the storytelling. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I really need to talk more about the story of the film itself, but in order to talk about just how in-depth this film goes, I'm going to have to delve into some spoiler territory, but don't worry, I'll refer to some very minor spoilers at first before delving into major spoilers later on in this film. I'll give you captions, but needless to say, you have been warned. What is the most basic elevator-style pitch you could give? Have you ever seen that Overwatch animated short, The Last Bastion? Imagine if that was a feature-length movie and the main robot was like Baymax, but female and voiced by Lupita Nyong'o, and the little bird that she had to take care of was a goose, and the overall film had the themes of heart, soul, and sacrifice from the Iron Giant. Ding! You'd get The Wild Robot. A story which is about a robot, which is a Rosm model, programmed to assist families in their everyday tasks. although this particular model will be later named Roz. She finds herself marooned and crash-landed on the shores of a forest island. After maneuvering her way up, she doesn't really know what to do with the place other than to follow the whims of her programming and fulfill commercialized quotas for the feral animal inhabitants. Of course, naturally, the animals don't take kindly to her assistance, much to her confusion. She manages to survive and adjust to her surroundings, including a very clever storytelling gimmick where she takes the time to load up a translation gimmick where she's able to understand what the animals are saying and can communicate to them. Not only is it a creatively inventive way for this character, a robot, to communicate with the animals, but when you think about it carefully, she has now broken the language barrier between animals and humankind that has existed for all these decades. But even then, she's not able to help out the animals in the way that her programming implies, so she can't really think of anything better to do than to get a transmit beacon home. But after a series of events, she finds herself taking care of a baby goose recently hatched. A cunning fox and a mother possum encourage the robot, Roz, to take care of the baby goose to prepare him for the winter migration.
Goslings in print on the first thing they see.
Which would be you.
Here is mother now.
I do not have the programming.
No one does.
They insist that it is her task to fulfill, and since she gives herself over to following the commercialized programming of her systems, she agrees to help out with raising the baby goose and then receiving the transmit beacon home. Yet as Roz finds herself raising this baby goose into maturity in time for the winter migration, she soon finds herself unintentionally becoming more attached to the animal inhabitants, and she soon realizes that there's more to herself and the animal inhabitants around her than their mere programming. Or as Orion Pax would say, there's more to them than meets the eye. So that's as much as I could say in regards to minor spoilers. I'll talk about the film's other great qualities before delving into major spoilers to really talk about the film's excellent qualities. As I've mentioned before, the animation style is gorgeous, and there's something, for lack of a better word, beautifully organic about the style that this film is going for. This watercolor approach to all the nature around her really brings the richness of the vibrancy of the colors and the organic homeliness of these textures to life. And there's something about the overall presentation that can appeal to all ages. The character designs and overall presentation is exaggerated and expressive enough for the children to get enjoyment out of it, yet there's also a maturity and a vibrance to the whole presentation that older audiences can get really drawn into. And the humor can range from goofy and wacky to surprisingly dark at times.
Swimming's easy.
Swim!
Honestly, the dark humor in this film is so dark it would make Thomas Ridgewell scream in ecstasy, I would imagine. But I digress. Something I really enjoyed about this film is its mature writing. Now, given the characteristics of these characters, they're very simple to get into, yet the writers are mature and smart enough to give the characters more depth as the story continues. Take the character of the wild robot herself, Roz, for example. I think her quality as a well-made character has to be given credit to both the writers, who have written her well so that she can be portrayed as someone who perceives herself as a commercialized machine, yet over a series of events gradually transitions to becoming a more whole person with heart. And this is also given credit to Lupita Nyong'o herself. Now, I think Lupita Nyong'o is having one of her best years in her entire acting career so far, and I'm so glad that she has standards as an actress. She said no to that awful propaganda called The Woman King, and she had every right to do so. And she still maintained her dignity as an actress by starring in excellent films like A Quiet Place Day One, and being in the lead role of The Wild Robot, which, if you ask me, is probably going to be the best film of this year.
Hello. I do not understand your response.
So I'm actually really happy for Lupita Nyong'o particularly. If you're somehow watching this, Lupita, I'm very happy for you. I really am.
Roz is a robot who is destined to help human beings complete their tasks. She goes about trying to be of help to these wild animals, and in the process, she has to learn to be more than she was programmed to be.
Lupita Nyong'o does an excellent job with her acting range, ranging from typical commercialized friendly kind of voice for the surface level stuff as the robot, but as the story continues, the character realizes there's more to herself than just her mere programming, and she actually has a heart. So we get this brilliantly natural progression, for lack of a better word, from commercialized helper to a more whole person who can actually have the ability to relate and to actually care for other people and to go beyond just mere protocol. Her transition from going beyond mere protocol to becoming a more whole person, I think, really happens overtly during a scene where she's trying to get her adopted goose son to swim, and then he falls into the peer pressure of everybody else, and he finds out about the fate of his mother, his biological mother, and the two of them have a conflict, which makes Roz begin to reconsider how she approaches the situation. Her having a heart is also foreshadowed in a later scene where she encounters another wrecked robot who tells her, "You shouldn't be feeling anything.
You are defective. I feel fine. You should not feel anything at all.
Really think about that. If she was just a mere machine, like a printer or some kind of ironing board, all she would do is just function, nothing more, nothing less. But the fact that she has feelings, just as implied in the Iron Giant movie, she has the ability to feel and to have existential hunger and emotional understanding that goes beyond mere programming. Those kind of existential metaphysical realities can't be reduced to empirical reality, which means she's more than a robot. Now, I don't know if whoever designed her intended her to be that way or not, but that's a discussion for another time. What matters is that she has these qualities, and that gives her room for character growth throughout the film, and it makes her a brilliantly poignant movie. The other animal characters seem to have more simple arcs by comparison, but they're nevertheless still meaningful. The fox starts off with a very cynical outlook on life, where, just like most of the other citizens, he just cares about survival of the fittest and what works for himself, and he has a very cynical outlook on humor, in the fact that he thinks that humor is only reduced down to the suffering of others, which backfires on himself at times, and due to the way he was brought up, he never really had any actual friends to love and care for. But all that changes when he meets Roz and her attempt at raising this baby goose. What starts out as a means to an end to possibly eat a fully grown goose later on, slowly transitions into a genuine sense of care for Roz's and the goose's well-being. Oh, and the baby goose is later called Brightbill, by the way, so I'll just refer to Brightbill as Brightbill. There's some other great characters. I was pleasantly surprised to see that Bill Nye was this elder goose who would lead the migration, and I'd say that was a well-cast choice, because Bill Nye does a great job of portraying an experienced goose who has had many years of experience leading the flock, but at the same time is open to some new experiences.
He has a chance. Where his wings end, his heart can pay the balance.
And over a series of events, you'll see some characters who used to have been rivals just by the mere flux of survival of the fittest start to come together for something more meaningful.
And I read the full book, all 279 pages, and then I read the script, which captures the essence without being, rote for rote duplication of the story. But
I will not harm anyone, not while we're in here.
The film brilliantly points out that it's not enough to just survive. Many a times, we have to go beyond our mere physical programming to be more than who we perceive ourselves to be. Because if all we do is just follow our flux all the time, then it's going to lead to destruction. But if we transcend that, then we have the ability to truly love and care for other people other than our own immediate groups. But in order to discuss these scenes, we're gonna have to delve into some really major spoiler territory, so spoiler alert, okay, you've been warned now, there's no excuse this time. This acknowledgement of how love can transcend this fallen world is strengthened by the fact that this film doesn't hold back on showcasing the brutality of the circle of life at times. Early on in the film, Roz getting chased by the animals leads to her knocking into several trees, and as she gets herself up and getting her bearings, she picks up a few twigs, a few branches, and then finds a few broken eggshells and a whole mother wing. Oh. Yeah, this film doesn't hold back on the brutality of nature. Even if what Roz did was accidental, the film acknowledges that sometimes in life people will come and go, and arguably people are not at fault for their own dying. That's just the way life is sometimes. Of course, there can be some various viewpoints on that, because many would say we're a fallen species and that we deserve to die, but nevertheless, that's not what this film is about. This film is about acknowledging the brutal cycle of life and death and celebrating our ability to transcend carnality to embrace love. So this notion of love is brilliantly foreshadowed right in the first act. As soon as Roz notices the baby goose egg hatch and see the baby goose immediately connect with her, she begins to glow. But then after this glow, she dismisses the experience and goes back to her initial programming. This is a very brilliant visual cue to indicate that she does have a heart, but it's just clouded by her delusion of mere programming. Now, there is something to note about the way baby birds are deliberately designed. Baby birds were deliberately designed from the moment that they hatch to immediately follow the first thing that they see, which would hopefully be their mother. If the first thing they see from hatching isn't their mother, they're going to follow something or someone else. That's just the way they're programmed, because that's their safety mechanism. This baby goose follows Roz around. On the one hand, it's a survival mechanism, but on the other hand, it's one that's programmed in a healthy sense to encourage love on part of the parent. So Roz has to learn to adjust to that. She's trying to get back to her factory home, and there's this brilliant exchange between herself and a mother possum where Roz keeps saying, "This baby goose keeps getting in the way of basic tasks." And then the mother possum with her heart says, "Oh yes, children do that, but it's worth raising them regardless." Like, that kind of that is such brilliantly genius, engaging writing that anyone can understand. That's brilliant. And from there, the film continues to develop these kind of dialogues where the characters begin to gradually actually care for each other and not give in to their basic instinct, whether it be commercialized programming or feral fighting.
Remember, there is nothing he can do that you can't.
There are several instances in the film where characters realize they have to cooperate together, and it's Roz who helps them do so. And that's further enhanced by Lupita Nyong'o's performance, which goes from a generic robot gradually to a more whole person. So by the time her well-being is threatened with the erasure of her memories, Brightbill thinks she might have been shut down for good, but when Brightbill says that he loves Roz, Roz wakes up, not with her initial programming, but with her heart. And that's impossible regarding the closest thing to a main villain that this series is going to get. But that right there, the ability for a person to recover by the power of the heart, that is a miraculous. That concept of recovering in a specific manner that goes beyond our understanding of blunt physical programming. That kind of miraculous connection to love is what makes this film such a brilliant film. Now, are there some flaws with this film? Well, I suppose there are a few instances in much earlier scenes that may require a bit of a leap in regards to suspension of disbelief, maybe. But honestly, that's the only thing I can think of as of right now. Other than that, I really can't think of anything wrong with this film. I honestly think this is one of the best DreamWorks films ever made. I'd rank it right up there with The Prince of Egypt and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish as one of the definitive best movies that DreamWorks as a company has ever made. Side note, I realize looking back, I gave Puss in Boots: The Last Wish a ranking of a 10.7 or so out of 12, but looking back, I really should have given that an 11 out of 12 just due to how rewatchable that movie is. So I'm gonna give this a similar rating. I'm gonna rank The Wild Robot an 11 out of 12. I could go on and on about some other qualities about the film, about how the world building leads to a more subtle take on environmental topics like global warming and other things like that without hand-fisting it down your throat. I could talk about some other instances of great character writing and how the visual storytelling enhances the narrative, but honestly, I'd be here all day. As someone living in the UK, I'd highly recommend everyone go watch The Wild Robot. It is well worth your time. ScotsThinker signing out.
It would be a shame to limit yourself to a small iPad or a small screen. And if you have the opportunity to see it in the cinema, I would grab it.